It is my great pleasure to introduce Heather Hayes. Heather Hayes is a research biologist and community science coordinator for the Intermountain Bird Observatory in Boise, Idaho. And she works on the long-billed curlew satellite tracking program, and she'll be speaking extensively about long-billed curlews with us. So I'm going to stop my share and let Heather take it over. Um,
All right, Glenn, can you see that okay?
yes,
All
very
right,
good.
great. All right, and I just got my first notification of internet connection unstable, so I'm just going to start out by saying that. So hopefully we'll be able to continue without interruption. So anyway, um, I wanted to say thank you. I was looking how many people have showed up, and I'm blown away. I really appreciate everyone coming out to learn about long-billed curlews and maybe a part of their life that you guys don't actually get a chance to see. So the long-billed curlew here in Idaho is on our state wildlife action plan, and it's considered a species of greatest conservation need. So basically, they're not endangered, but they're on our radar here because in our southwest corridor of Idaho, our studies have concluded that they're in about a 99% decline in the past 40 years. And so that's a very short amount of time when you think about the geological timeline to have a species in decline like that. And before I get too far into the program, I always like to show, hopefully you can see this because I don't see my little window. But this is the skull of a long-billed curlew. And I like to show this first because it really gives you a sense of really in the hand how long that bill is. And also to let people know they don't use this bill for any form of defense. Because if they were to chase or dive bomb something and try to hit it with their beak, they're probably going to end up breaking that. And so they won't be able to eat. So they only use this to eat. They won't use it to defend. And they also don't have talons like raptors do, right? Their feet remind me of like little chicken feet. So they don't have much in the sense of a way to defend themselves. But they do have an effective strategy that we're going to talk about as we get more into the program. So let me get going here. And for those who haven't met a long-billed curlew, let me introduce you. So basically, that's the Curlew's contact call. Basically, back and forth. How are you doing? Where are you at? What are you doing today? And curlews are really cool. They're North America's largest shorebird, and they love to breed in the short grassland habitats like what we have here in Idaho, but they also breed all the way through the Intermountain West up into Canada. So their beak morphology is unique too. Their beak can grow up to about 8.5 inches long. And if you've ever held a chicken or a duck before, that's kind of what it's like to hold a curlew. So it weighs about 1 to 2 pounds. And then curlews are also what's called sexually dimorphic. So basically, it's just a fancy way to say that the males and the females are different. They have differences, right? And especially different sizes. So if you guys want to drop in the chat, a little quiz question here for you. Which one is the male? Is the male in the front or is the male in the back? So feel free to drop your guesses in the chat. But if you guessed that the male is the smaller one in the front, you are absolutely correct. So the males have a little bit smaller body and shorter bill, where the females are going to have a larger body and a longer bill. Now, having said that, you're going to find males with a little bit longer bill and you're going to find females that are a little bit smaller. But for the most part, this is how you'll see them. And for the crew and I, it's really important to know males from females at what time of day. And I'll kind of get into why that's important here in a minute. But let's talk about why we're studying them. And so here in Idaho, the public lands are steeped generationally. I moved here from Ohio with very little knowledge of public lands, but the more I learned is like generation after generation has grown up and utilized the public lands with some form of recreation. It could be mountain biking, it can be target shooting, it can be ATVing, jeeping, horseback riding, you name it, you can do it on the public lands. So apparently back in the day, there were so many curlews that would come in during migration in the spring that it looked like clouds, that there were so many. And over the years, the people that were out recreating all the time noticed that they just didn't see them coming in those numbers anymore. So some phone calls started getting made to the Bureau of Land Management, Idaho Fish and Game, just trying to like ask, has anybody noticed this besides us? Does anybody know what's going on? And then the word reached the University of Montana, and there was a gentleman by the name of Roland Redmond that actually came to Idaho to study curlews once he heard about what was going on in this potential decline. So when he came to Middleton, Idaho, he basically laid a great population foundation. So basically, in about 1979, he concluded there was roughly about 2,000 individual curlews on this particular part of the public lands. That was the study site. And so fast forward all these years later, the population is still crashing. 2009, the Intermountain Bird Observatory got involved. And so what we did is we replicated his surveys. So we ran the same road, same time of day, same protocol, and we came up with about less than 100 individual curlews. And so this was probably back in 2001, I'd say, because we lost our curlew funding then. So I'm kind of afraid to know what the numbers might be like today. So these numbers, it's really hard to wrap your head around when this particular study site historically had the densest curlew nesting grounds in all of North America. So it's really hard pill to swallow. And in the 80s, the BLM actually named this particular part of the public lands the long-billed curlew habitat area of critical environmental concern. So it's just ironic that having its history of the densest nesting population to be in this huge crash was just really hard to understand. So, of course, the big question, why are they declining? And when I talk to school kids about learning about, migration and things like that, and when there's a decline involved, I always try to get them to think about to get out of their own backyard, so to speak. So, if something's declining in your backyard, it might not just be your backyard that's the problem, right? So you want to think about their whole annual life cycle. So not only their wintering grounds and their breeding grounds, but everything in between. So their migration routes could be having some serious things going on with their habitats along the way. And so the public lands in Idaho, for those of you that don't know, it's more of a high desert environment. And this habitat is great and is abundant and has wildlife diversity everywhere. And so, but unfortunately for curlews, a lot of these predators cause lots of problems for their nesting success and for their survival. And again, as we're thinking about it, we want to think about threats across the range, and there's so many. So, for example, here on their breeding grounds, in our area, Boise, Idaho is growing by leaps and bounds. The urban sprawl is incredible. So it's not only affecting curlews, it's affecting all sorts of wildlife. So urban sprawl is a problem. Habitat degradation. The public lands are becoming trash dumps. So, that's, changing where we're seeing certain wildlife on the public lands. And agricultural fields. So, on their breeding grounds, curlews love to eat grasshoppers and all kinds of insects. And those might be being impacted in the agricultural fields where they're eating because of the pesticide usage. Now, if we kind of think about maybe what could be happening on their wintering grounds, let's say California, there seems to always be, massive droughts happening in certain areas. Um, Also, like agricultural practices change, which can change maybe how much standing water is out there for the shorebirds, not just curlews, but shorebirds in general that rely on that water that's on the ground. So there's so many different things happening. And of course, all the recreation that happens out there. So the influx of population in Boise is putting a lot more recreational pressure on the public lands where this wildlife calls home. So again, there's ATVing, there's jeeping, and there's recreational shooting. And so when you have so many different possibilities, it's hard to know where to start. And so you just kind of start lining out your hypotheses and you just kind of see where it goes from there. So let's just take a minute and we're going to talk about their nesting biology. So the first thing you probably notice about this picture is the eggs are on the ground. So that seems to be a pretty big problem for curlews, especially when there's so many predators around. So they typically lay 3 to 4 eggs after they show up on the breeding grounds, typically around, I'd say mid-March to end of March, and they usually stay till about the end of June, beginning of July if it was a good reproductive year. And as you can see, that nest doesn't look very comfortable whatsoever. It's got a few sticks in it, maybe some dried grass. They just use a little cow's hoof print or a depression in the ground. And if they don't find one, the male will actually scrape a little depression. So he'll use his little chicken feet, scrape a little bit, and then he'll bend down and press his breast down into the ground. And he puts his butt real high in the air and he gives a big wiggle and he pushes that chest in as he's wiggling and it makes a little depression. And so then the female, if she accepts that nest, which a lot of times she doesn't, and he's out there scraping away all day long, she'll come in. When she accepts the nest, she starts to lay the eggs. But what's interesting is she only lays one at a time. And so I'll give you guys a minute to think about it. If you want to drop your guess in the chat, feel free. But why do you think the female is going to lay one egg and then she leaves for about a day, day and a half, and she doesn't come back to that one lone egg in the on the ground? So just give that a thought and I'll come back to it. So typically those eggs are on the ground for a full month being incubated, and that's a really, really long time for those two parents to protect those eggs. And but they have a few things going for them, and two of those things are beside the nest. I don't know if you guys can tell, but those are cow patties. And so cow patties, we feel, are another way to camouflage the nest. So let's just take an aerial predator, for instance, like a prairie falcon or ravens or anyone that's looking for a quick snack flying by. If there's more to visually distract them, it's less likely that they're going to see those eggs. And the grad student we had working with us actually did find through her research with us that there was a statistical difference, that there was higher nest success when they laid them next to things like rocks and cow patties. So that was a pretty cool finding. So now back to my quiz question. The reason why the female takes off and doesn't hang around is because she wants to attract absolutely zero attention to those eggs or that nesting area. So by laying that egg, she's taking a risk, but she's relying on that camouflage. So she takes off for about a day, day and a half, develops that next egg, comes back, and hopefully if that egg's still there, she feels safe, and she's going to continue to do that until all 4 eggs are laid. And so again, she won't incubate until all 4 are on the ground. So as you can see, being a master of camouflage is key to being a grafter. And so it's not just the eggs, right? So it's going to be the cute little chicks. Let me see if I can get that to play again because it's so adorable and I could watch it all day long. The chicks are really speckled and they stick really close to that nest in the beginning. And then if you can see, there's an adult curlew in the lower right-hand corner of your screen that's sitting really low. We call it sitting tight to the nest. And if you can look behind it, there's a big dried out cow patty. So it's like the bird is actually leaning right into that cow patty. And so, do you recall when I said in the beginning with the male and the female differences that it's important what time of day we're looking for males or females? And that's because these guys actually work together as parents and they switch on and off the nest, but they're extremely timed about it. And so the females are going to sit all day long. So while the male's out sleeping, napping, and eating, She's protecting the nest, sitting really low, really tight. And sometimes he comes back around through the day and does a little patrol, but for the most part, he's gone. And so as soon as the sun goes down and there's just a little bit of light left, the males are going to come in and switch with the females. So they flutter in and the female takes off for the night. So the male's going to sit and protect the nest all night long while the female gets some shut-eye and some food and probably some more shut-eye. So when the sun comes up in the morning, right at dawn, is when we're going to want to be looking for females. So I don't want to like follow a male that I see flying in the morning because that probably means he doesn't have a nest. I want to find a female and I'm going to follow her to see where she leads me. So that's kind of why we need to know who we're looking at when during the day. So incubation behavior is very different than right before the chicks are about to hatch. So during incubation, they, like I said, they want to be as quiet as possible. They don't want to be attracting any attention. In fact, our protocol states that we can't approach a nest when we find it if there's any ravens or crows in our sight. So when we find the nest, we can't make a move until we're as certain as we can be that there's no crows or ravens around. Because if they watch us, they're going to go right for that nest after we leave. So we want to be cautious, and obviously the curlews are being very cautious by being very quiet for that month. And like I mentioned before, they sit really tight and lay as flat as they can, but sometimes they sit really, really tight. And what I mean by that is they actually won't get off the nest when we approach to, because we want to, what we do is we float the eggs to find out how old they are. That way we know when those eggs are about to hatch. So we start to check the nest from a distance about every 3, 4 days. And when it gets up to about that hatch time is when we really start seeing if we see any chicks. So check out this fun little video. So this was a little male and he refused to get off that nest. So I pulled each egg out very carefully. I floated it in my cup of water and then I gently put each one back under. And I named this bird Tranquilo, Spanish for calm. So that was a really fun experience. So, but that kind of changes when it's about time for those chicks to hatch. So if you think about humans that are about to have babies, everybody gets a little crazy. They're getting nesty and they're getting edgy. They're getting worried. Well, it's the same thing for these guys. And so they typically will not flush off that nest, unlike that other bird. Typically, they'll flush off right about when you're at the nest. So when their life feels that threatened, then they're going to flush off. And they do that, the predator strategy, the broken wing display. So a lot of people know that with the killdeers. The shorebird cousin to the curlew, I call them. They're the ones that'll nest in the gravel or somewhere like that. That's usually inconvenient, like in a driveway. But anyway, when they pop off their nest, they drag their wings to make it like they're injured to draw that predator away from the nest. So here's a video of my bird I called Sushi. Hopefully you can see her there. And that's when my heart's in my throat every every single nest I approach. But you can see a little bit of that wing display there. And a lot of times they'll just circle you because they kind of know you're not going away. So we try to get to the nest and away from the nest as quick as possible. And we kind of take a circuitous route. So we don't want to walk straight to the nest because we want to just kind of throw off the scent to any coyotes or anything else walking around out there. And so this is probably maybe a 5 minute old little baby curlew. And so these guys are born eyes closed but feathered, and they're going to be dried off in about an hour or so. And then they're all going to be up running with mom and dad learning how to forage. So these guys are precocial. So they don't have the luxury of being a songbird like a robin up in a nest, having a couple funky little feathers on their head with their mouths open all the time, waiting to be fed. These guys don't have that luxury with all the predators that are out there. So it's very beneficial that these guys have their eyes open, dried off, and running with mom and dad as soon as possible. So I want to play for you their alarm call. So it's going to be very different than the contact call you heard earlier. This is going to be very panicked. And you might hear a little bit of it on the beach, but it's usually much more toned down. It's more of an agitation that you'll hear out there on their wintering grounds than an actual alarm call. So have a listen to this and just try to picture what it'd be like if you had twenty birds. This is going to be the sound of one bird, but if you had 20 birds over your head, it's very heart pounding to hear. So have a listen. So it just goes on and on. It literally does not stop at all until the human or the predator gets away maybe 300 meters. As soon as that bird feels that it's escorted you off the premises far enough, then they'll turn around and come back. So it doesn't sound like a very effective strategy, but because that scream is so loud, it's broadcast across the landscape, and all those other nesting curlews hear it. So it becomes a strength in numbers. And it's super effective. I've seen them chase off golden eagles. I've seen them chase off coyotes. I mean, it literally looks like a little beehive in a cartoon chasing a coyote through the field. So for having the physical, lacking the physical type of things that you would think an animal has to defend itself, that voice really is effective. And so, again, when I give parts of this program to the younger crowd, invariably I get asked, well, have they ever hit you when they're dive bombing you, or do they ever hurt you? And I really try to drive home the fact that they cannot hurt you no matter how loud and scary they sound. So this is just a quick video to show what it's like when you're getting mobbed by the two parents and how close they will get to you. And it's before all the other curlews showed up. So we never really want to hang out for that to happen because not only does it stress the birds out, and that's not our goal. We just want to get in and get out of there so they can get back to business. But it is very stressful for you, and you don't want to run because you don't know if there's any chicks on the ground. And so it's a very kind of timed, orchestrated thing when you go out to check eggs. So have a look. So as you can see, they get super, super close to you, but they won't hit you. And so we started studying the curlews in 2009, but in 2013 is when we finally secured some funding to put some transmitters on some of our research birds. And so these transmitters, they weigh about 9.5 grams. Hopefully you can see this because like I said, I can't see myself showing you. There's two little solar panels right here that charge up a little micro battery inside. It's got this really soft pad right here and this long antenna. And so it's not easy to get permission to put a transmitter or any type of tracking collar or anything on any type of wildlife. There's a lot of permitting you have to do with the federal government. And you have to come under a certain weight or at a certain weight. It's a ratio between what you're putting on the animal to the animal's weight. And the really great thing about the Curlew transmitters is we come under the required weight, which is awesome. And so a couple reasons we wanted to put transmitters on the bird were number one, we wanted to know where are our birds overwintering. And in knowing that, we'd be able to track how they're getting to their overwintering grounds and we can dial in what is their habitats that they're using, what are the most important habitats that we see a lot of curlews congregating at. And then we were kind of hoping it would be nice to see if these transmitters would help us uncover the reason why we're in this like 98% decline, 99% decline in Southwest Idaho. So those were kind of like our two main ideas about using these transmitters. And just as a side note, if I'm remembering right, I think these run about $3,500 a piece. And then it's like an additional $1,200 to have this data live online for the public to go check out where the curlews are. But before we could even put a transmitter on a bird, we had to figure out how do we catch a curlew because we'd never done it before. So what we decided to try is using one of our mist nets. And so basically the net you see them holding is about 18 meters long. So it doesn't look that long in this picture. But these nets are typically poles are upright in the ground. Net is stretched this way. And as the songbirds fly, they fly into the net and fall into the little hammock. Well, obviously, we know curlews aren't going to fly into our nets. So we thought we would capitalize on their nesting incubation behavior. That if they're so quiet and they sit so tight to the nest when there's a predator around that they don't want to attract any attention, what if we just walk the net over the bird? Like, what are the chances that would work? We were just like, let's give it a try. And so what we do is we have a biologist that's up on a hillside that has a really good vantage point with a scope that can see the bird on the ground because once we're on the ground with the net, we can't see it the way the landscape is. So they give us hand signals, whether to go right, left, or straight. And we just keep going until they start to do this to let us know we're getting closer. But then at some point, it's really hard for them to see how far away we are from the bird. So at that point, one of us gets up on our tiptoes, tries to see where the bird is, and usually one of the net runners will see the bird. So then you just take a deep breath, you start to approach the bird, maybe a little bit quicker, and then you drop the poles, and then that allows the net to just kind of float like this and then it lays on top of the bird. And it seems like as soon as the net drops and it's all settled for a second, the bird realizes the jig is up. So the bird will pop off the nest, but we want to run as fast as we can to secure the wings so it doesn't like damage any primary feathers or, damage his bill or anything like that. And as you can see in this picture on the left, there's another big old cow patty, adding to that camouflage. And then Jay, our research director, is holding the bird. And if you want to drop your answer to this little quiz question in the chat, knowing what you know now about males and females, what do you think this is that we're banding here, a male or a female? And I'll come back to that. So basically what we do is we put a really soft like handkerchief or like a wide sock over the bill and the face because it just kind of takes their sight away and it makes them really calm. And then one person holds and the other person starts banding. So we'll take all sorts of measurements like wing, obviously the bill, their tarsus or their leg. And then we also, our grad student started to bring some other metrics into it too when she was doing her grad work. And I'll share that in the next slide here in a minute. But if anybody guessed this was a female he was holding, you are correct. Not only is she big, which is kind of hard to tell when you don't see the male next to her, but it's during the middle of the day. And so the male is probably out napping somewhere and has no idea we just snatched his lady off the nest for a few minutes. So, which brings up a good point too, is once we take the bird from the nest, we have multiple people watching that nest with a scope to make sure that the coast is clear and there's no dangers around the nest. So our grad student Stephanie, she brought in some other metrics and additional data collection methods. So we were doing some blood sampling, checking for like disease and genetics, and then we were taking buccal swabs. And basically all that is taking a little Q-tip, which is really hard to see in that picture, rolling it around and getting some cheek cells. And when we did that the first time, we noticed something very cool about the curlew's bill. And I don't want to give it away. I'm going to have you guys watch this and see if you can see what's happening when Stephanie takes her swab. Can you guys see that the tip of the bill is bending? And so that's called rhynchokinesis, which a lot of shorebirds have. So basically, it's got a flexible bill tip. And so, and from what I was reading, there's like these little tiny sensory organs. So when they're probing down into the earth or the sand, um, they can sense the prey and they're able to use that bill to sense and to help pull up their prey too. So if you want to go back and see this YouTube video, it's under a very extremely scientific name. You might want to write it down. It's, I think, under bendy beak curlew. So keep that in mind if you want to see it again. And so this is just a fun video. You guys probably see this all the time, but when I got this video for the first time from Carol, who is a curlew checker for us, I was just, I fell in love even more with curlews. But it's just so amazing, like how far down in the sand that they can go and how useful that rhynchokinesis is for their bill. So much fun. So after we take all those measurements, we all take a deep breath because now it's time to put the transmitter on. And we want to make sure that it's comfortable because they're going to be wearing this for anywhere between 3 and 5 years. And so I know it sounds weird, like how are you sure that the bird is comfortable with this transmitter on? So, but believe it or not, we figured out a way that they communicate that to us. So what we do is we fit the transmitter. It's actually called a leg loop harness. So hopefully you can see this, but there's these two little loops on either side, these metal loops. And so two leather straps come through there. And then if you kind of think of like a climbing harness, that's kind of how it fits on. And then the transmitter sits up on the back. And so we temporarily fit it. And then what we do is we actually release the bird inside a little camping tent. Nothing fancy, just a little Coleman tent. And then we zip it up and then we put, we just wait to see what the bird's going to do. And the bird is going to do one of two behaviors. It's either going to run around like crazy because it's uncomfortable, or it's going to sit down because it's uncomfortable. So drop your guesses in the chat. Like, what would you do if something felt pinchy or didn't feel right? Like, how would you communicate to that to somebody? So if you guessed that they sit down, you are correct. So basically, they might wobble a little bit, take a few steps, and then like, I'm not taking another step until this gets fixed. So we'll take the bird out, we gently readjust it, and we'll put the bird back inside the tent. And this is what we want to see. As you can tell, she doesn't care about the leg flag or the leg band on her legs. She doesn't care about the transmitter on her back. All she can think about right now is getting back to those eggs because remember, nobody's sitting on those eggs at this point. And then the other thing is, as soon as we know they're comfortable, we secure the transmitter in place and we want to release them as soon as possible. So after we release, then we want to clean up everything as soon as possible. So we usually have a team of people. So it's like a well-oiled machine. Because the longer we hang out there, the longer the birds won't go back to the nest. Because again, they view us as a predator and they don't want to lead us back to their nest, which obviously we already know where the nest is, but in their mind, they're just like, nope, I'm not going there. I'm going to fly over there and forage, or I'm going to fly over there and forage, but they won't go back to that nest. So we hurry up and hightail it out of there, and we find another vantage point to get up a little higher, and we get our scopes out, and then we watch to make sure that they go back to the nest. And out of the 100+ birds we put transmitters on, every single bird has gone back. So that's super awesome. And so you can go to this Move Bank link. You can take a picture of your screen if you want. And this is kind of a simplified map of what you'll
Uh-oh. Did we lose Heather? We're gonna hold on again here. Well, hopefully Heather will come back. Uh, oh, there. Yeah, we just lost her. She'll be right back. Um, it is vacation season in Idaho, and the population of her town has tripled because of out of town visitors. So they will that causes some occasional problems like this. She'll be right back. So um, there was um oh, Heather's
Am
here.
I back?
Yes, you're back.
All right, I'm re-logging on. Hold on one moment.
Uh,
Okay. I hope I wasn't talking to dead air for too long.
I'm trying to get what you said before we lost you, but
I was talking about the tracking map.
yeah, you had just introduced it and then you froze.
Okay, sounds good. So I need to reshare, right? Here we go.
While you're doing that, there was a question about whether because the eggs are laid, you know, one or more days apart, why do they not hatch one or more days apart? And I think I imagine the answer for curlews is the same as it is for most other birds, and that they actually don't start developing until they're being incubated. So
Exactly right. Exactly right. So until the incubation process starts, that's why since they get incubated all at the same time, they're all going to hatch out at the same time. So perfect. Yep, you got it.
yeah.
All right. So let me make sure I got my sound and everything on. Sorry about that. Share. Okay, great. So this is just a simplified tracking map. And if anybody needs directions on how to get to movebank.org and how to use it, I'll make sure that my email shows up at the end and I can send you an email on how to do it. But it basically just allows you to follow the birds. You can zoom in, you can see their tracks of where they're going, what habitats they're using. Um, and what's really great about this is like you could check in the morning and they'll be in one spot, you check at night, they're at another. So you're not going to see it live streaming, but you'll see them move throughout the day. And the transmitters usually transmit between like 8, 12, and 24 hours. And so by doing using the trackers, it was like Christmas, being able to see where the birds were overwintering. And most of our birds overwinter in the Central Valley of California and all the way down through Mexico. And so, and we did start to discover some very interesting things about their decline by using these transmitters. So before we put transmitters on the birds, like I said, we started in 2009 with no transmitters. So every time we found a curlew on the landscape, we would find it like this picture here. So it was torn up in pieces, and bird after bird we'd find like this. We're like, wow. So predation seems to be a huge problem for these guys. So like we we knew there was going to be other things happening. We knew recreational shooting might be a problem. We knew predators might be a problem. Maybe cattle might be a problem. But when we started to see this, we're like, wow, okay, so we might need to rethink this. So at this point, we developed a really great relationship with the Idaho Department of Fish and Game's Wildlife Health Laboratory. So basically, it's their job to figure out what killed an animal. So they told us, hey, anytime you find a bird like this or a carcass, bring it in. We'll x-ray it for you. And so the very first bird that we took in was this guy here. And he unfortunately was found like that. And then this was the x-ray we got back. And so, can anybody guess? I'm sure everybody can guess what shows up in an X-ray really, really bright, bright white. Like you can see the bones here really easy, right? The light bluish purple parts here. But what shows up really bright white on an X-ray? So if you said metal, you are absolutely correct. So let's just say you broke your arm and you had a pin put in your arm. You see that pin beautifully in your X-ray, right? Because it's metal. And so that's what's going on here. So bird after bird we took in, the x-rays were all looking the same. And so we thought, okay, this was a little bit of a game changer. Like I said, we knew recreational shooting was going to, probably have an impact. But at this point, we had no idea what kind of impact it was going to have. And so the lab gives us like a forensics report basically. So the preliminary and final diagnosis would match and it would say gunshot and then scavenging. And so something that looked very black and white in the field, like, oh, there's a bird in pieces. It looks very obvious it got predated on, is now changed to getting shot first, left on the landscape, and then say a coyote walks by, right? They're not going to say no to a free meal. And so that really kind of changed our thinking about how to move forward with this information that we discovered. Um, because from 2013 when we started, and then 5 years into it to 2018, we had lost almost 50% of our transmitters birds to illegal shooting in Southwest Idaho. And so at this point, we knew we started to have to like try to get the word out. And as we were trying to develop that, 2017 was a particularly bad year, and we lost three of our birds and then found an incidental, which basically means it wasn't a part of our study flock, but we found it on the road, and that was the unmarked one in your upper right-hand corner. So basically, when a bird goes down, we're watching this range of numbers on the computer. And if those range of numbers starts to slow down or stop, we know something is either A, wrong with the transmitter, or B, it's the bird's not moving, so something's wrong with the bird. So we have specialized like antenna that can hear the ping inside the transmitters. So we sent the biologist out with the transmitter antenna, and so he punched in the last known coordinates of where the satellite was saying these transmitters were. And so when he did that, they popped up on the Google map, when he was punching it in, all of a sudden there was a public pin drop that said shoot and spot. And ironically, it was in the middle of where all these birds were. And so obviously, this doesn't suggest that the person who dropped that public pin on Google Maps shot these birds. But what this does indicate is this area is a highly used recreational shooting area. So we can now take this information and share it with the BLM officers, hoping that they can add these like hot spots, we called them, to their enforcement route. But the really difficult part of that is that there's like these millions of acres of public lands. And I think at the time, there was only three enforcement officers. So catching people in the act, whether it's curlews or anything else that was getting shot out there, which there was lots getting shot. Like we were picking up Swainson's hawks, red-tailed hawks. Um, Idaho Power had their own like biology division people that they were picking up golden eagles and dead bald eagles. So many, many things were getting shot out there. And so it's just really hard to catch people in the act. But when you think about curlews that are a very long-lived species, when you are losing them at such a rate, like we're already in this huge decline, and then these two birds here on the left-hand screen, they were a mated pair, male and female, and they were shot a few weeks apart right after their chicks had hatched. And unfortunately, curlews are not a species where the other curlews are going to come in and take care of those little chicks. So we didn't lose just two adults out of the breeding population. We've now lost two adults, four chicks that would eventually breed and help boost the population. So it's really, really tough for them to come back from this kind of loss. So I don't have enough time, and I'm probably already going over time to talk about all the outreach efforts we've done. But two of the biggest ones we've done is we partnered with the Idaho Bird Conservation Partnership, BLM, and Idaho Department of Fish and Game to develop a hunter's ed program that I would take in to hunter's ed classes. Now, I want to make sure I'm very clear. We don't think hunters are shooting curlews because that's why hunters go into hunter's ed class, right? They're learning what they can and can't shoot. But these are the folks that are out enjoying and recreating on the public lands. And there is a species of ground squirrel that you are allowed to shoot on the public land. So you have all these recreators out there that are responsible. They're kind of like the boots on the ground. So if I can educate them about what's going on out there, hopefully it's the see something, say something, and know your target was the name of the campaign. And so it was just teaching people about being ethical and what is illegal to shoot and what is okay to shoot. And then for the younger crowd, we developed curlews in the classroom. And I would go through all the classrooms in the Treasure Valley, in the Boise area, and then in all those outlying rural communities that really don't get those kind of opportunities. And they're the ones living on the fringes of the public lands. And so they're going to grow up using those in public lands and having fun. So it's a longer term investment, but I just felt like it was such a good way to reach kids at this age who already have relatives and family that are out there and taking them on ATV rides. And so a lot of these kids already had been on the public lands. And so that was a lot of fun to do, and I really miss doing that and making those connections. I did that for almost 10 years and probably up to 5,000 students a year, if not more. So that was great. So fast forwarding to 2019, I gained some funding up by where I live in the West Central Mountains of Idaho through the Payette Children's Forest. And we wanted to just see what curlews were doing up here in the mountains because we have a lot of sweeping grasslands, a lot of beautiful areas for the curlews. And it's very different, right? It's not public lands. There's not all this heavy duty recreational shooting and things like that. So I put up these wanted posters all over my little town, and all of a sudden my phone started ringing. And so I was meeting a lot of great people talking about curlews. And then I got a call from this young girl that you see in this picture here who said, I've got two curlews that are across the street that I see every day. And so I went and met her, and sure enough, they had lots of curlews out there. So in 2020, I started a pilot season. And so obviously we know 2020 is COVID, right? And so I did not end up studying curlews down in the Boise area on the public lands because living up where I do, everybody was very nervous they were going to shut the canyons down to keep people from the valley coming up to hide in the mountains because of COVID. And so I was afraid to get stuck down there. So I was super fortunate to have had secured this grant funding through the Payette Children's Forest that I could just study birds basically in my backyard, which was awesome. And so it was early in the season. It was probably like, I don't know, end of March. Curlews were already coming in. And so I was just basically mapping where I saw pairs of curlews. And so that's typically what you do in the beginning because nobody's really nesting yet. They're still checking out their space. They're still checking out, if it's a new pair that's come together, because curlews are monogamous until one of them dies and they will find another mate. And so everybody's just, kind of getting their legs back under them after a long migration. And I had my car parked and I happened to look and I saw Curlew just kind of snoozing in the field. And so I was taking my notes down. I took a GPS of where my car, where I was at in my car. And then all of a sudden I turn again and the Curlew is running through the grass like it's being chased. And I was like, why isn't it flying? Like something's different. And then all of a sudden I saw it sink in the grass and another Curlew took off. And so I just saw a nest switch, which kind of blew my mind because that was really early for them to be nesting. But this was truly my first year at this elevation. So everything was kind of new for me. And so that's how I found Dozer. And so I don't know if you can see in that picture that one, the little neck with the beak right there. It's usually really hard because the heat waves rise so early in the morning. And then, floated the eggs and took all my data. So that was a super fun discovery to find it so early. But finding nests is hard enough. But when you have to do a nest check every 3 to 4 days after you find the nest, we don't want to keep approaching it, right? We want to try to stay as far away as we can, not cause extra stress, but sometimes you can't help it. So everything was growing so fast. The alfalfa was growing really fast in this other picture here. I don't know if anybody can see that curlew. Maybe you can raise your hand if you can see that curlew in the alfalfa. I was actually shocked that it didn't flush as I was coming through there, but that's where it is in that red circle. You could just see the little eye peering at me right there. And so we are not without our predators up here on these big sweeping ranch lands. I went to do a nest check on Dozer and I heard this really loud machine. and I couldn't see it because it was this big rolling hill. So I stood up as high as I could on my car and I saw this thing. And I panicked and I knew where the rancher lived. So I flew down to his house and I said, "Hey, listen," I said, "is there any way I can talk to your guy out there and like mark the nest that he can go around it?" And so basically what this is a rock roller, and they lovingly call this ranch field the rock garden because every winter rocks are heaved up out of the ground. So every spring they roll them back into the ground. So anyway, he said, absolutely. But here's the thing, we don't like to mark nests because all the magpies, all the ravens, everything's going to see these little flags flipping out there. So we never like to mark nests. But I felt in this instance I didn't have a choice because the nest was going to fail. So I thought it was going to fail one way or the other. So I thought there's a better chance of maybe it won't fail if I use the flags. So I took one morning and I went out and I put, I don't know if you can see that little pink flag, but I put about 30 of those around the bird, about 50 feet away from the nest. I don't know if you can see the bird in this picture. I can't remember if I marked her. Oh yeah, there she is. And she sat there like a champ. And I kept like, I know she couldn't hear me, but I was like, I'm doing this for you, man. And so it was great. They called me when they were done with the field the next day. I could not wait to get there. And she was just still sitting there, just happy as a clam. So I went around very quietly, collected all my flags, and away she went with the rest of her incubation. So then it was time to have the banding event. And we went ahead and decided to do it in the evening because I'm 3.5 hours away from Boise. So it took the team a while to get up here. So setup is a lot. Everybody's a little bit on edge because you get one chance. Like if the bird flushes, you're done until the next opportunity, which would either be the next morning or the next evening. But we had great success. We trapped Dozer, no problem. And we ended up naming the male Dozer instead of the female that I first saw, just because now we had him banded. So Dozer's actually a male. And so is nesting in Indian Valley, Idaho, at an elevation of about 3,000 feet in some of the most beautiful mountain areas that you'll ever see. But what was super, super exciting about this guy is he's the first bird in our study flock to go all the way to the coast of California, and he landed in Morro Bay. And so it was all the buzz in the curlew world up here because it was like this huge missing piece of a puzzle. Like could not figure out where are these coastal birds that are overwintering? Where are they breeding at? Because we've, trapped over 100 curlews and not a single one flew to the coast of California until Dozer. And the other really exciting thing about this is since all of our other study flock seems to land in all those, beautiful sweeping agricultural fields in Central California and then all the way down through Mexico, we now have this one bird that is hanging out on the beach where there's people surfing, horseback riding, birding, people walking their dogs. Like, so all these people now get a chance to see this bird. And when people did start seeing this bird, my phone started ringing off the hook. And so the very first person to give us a call was Petra Clayton. And she actually, at first, when she saw him, thought he had gotten wrapped in fishing line because she said she saw something sticking out of his back. And so she started taking pictures. And it wasn't until she got home and put her pictures on her computer that she actually saw the leg flags. So, through a circuitous route of phone calls, I finally got contacted. And then away we went from there. It was awesome. So I've given lots of different presentations now, which is great because it just bolsters that conservation effort. Because now, like so many more people that have no clue about what happens and the dangers they're in the breeding territory can now kind of be involved in like, hey, what can we do to help on this end, or how can we help support their habitats along the way? So it's been just such this one bird. What Dozer has done for curlew conservation has been amazing. So the following year, it was his mate's turn, and his mate's name is Mimi. So in 2021, we trapped Mimi, and it was kind of an interesting night because we didn't know that was a night that a lot of the ranchers were moving cattle down the dirt roads. So after we got her weighed and all of her measurements and got her transmitter on, we had to just take a breath and let all the cattle pass by. I'm not sure she didn't know anything that was going on at that point. I think she just figured like, what's next? But anyway, so Mimi is an international traveler. So she ended up going to Mexico and she was hanging out in the Biosphere Reserve of the Upper Gulf of California and Colorado River Delta. So this brings up an interesting fact, and that is that male curlews and female curlews of a mated pair do not overwinter together. And so just to give you a little perspective, the blue star that's going to bounce on your screen is where dozer overwinters. And then the little heart represents Mimi, where she overwinters. So that's quite a long way away. I think it's a little over 500 miles. And then the big question is, do these long distance relationships really work? And believe it or not, for curlews, they absolutely do. So this is Dozer and Mimi getting reacquainted right on their territory where they are every year in Indian Valley. And it just never ceases to amaze me that they can spend all this time away from another in the winter and come back and meet each other on the same territory. So that's kind of the neat thing about curlews is the males have very high site fidelity. So he's going to try to claim that territory when he gets back first. Before the females show up, he wants to go back to his territory and start defending it. Then the females are going to show up about 2 weeks later. So Dozer's nesting stats are a little bit of a mixed bag. So in 2020, Dozer and Mimi had two nests. The first nest, I believe, was probably predated on by magpies. There was these long hedgerows of just these brushy, kind of thorny bushes that the magpies love. And so when I checked the nest, the eggs were gone after our banding of Dozer. So could have been Raven, but there was no eggshells left to indicate that any hatching had happened. But the second nest was a full clutch, which is unusual because they usually lay less eggs the second time. And it is believed that it hatched. So there was a couple little eggshells, and then the neighbors said they kept seeing little chicks running back and forth with the parents, like kind of cutting across the road. So not 100% certain, but they were the only nesting pair that close right there. So I'm thinking it was Dozer. Um, 2021, we suspect there was a successful nest hatching. I didn't get to see the chicks. I missed the hatch date. But there was lots of shell fragments, which a lot of times indicates a successful nest. And I was getting mobbed like crazy. So even though everything was tall, I couldn't really see anything. I have a feeling there was chickies running around out there, and the parents were telling me all about it. And then in 2022, the last time I was able to do nest checks, by that time we had started to lose our research funding. And then the weather was horrible, just horrible. Constant, huge deluging thunderstorms. Um, and each time I would go to check them from a distance, I would see them actually foraging together, which they don't hardly ever do. Like one of them should have been on the nest. Sometimes after, like when one comes in for the switch, every now and then they'll forage a little bit together, but 9 times out of 10, it's like one comes in, one goes out. So when I saw them constantly foraging, I kind of knew things weren't looking good for 2022. So transmitter's lifespan and the data we want to get is about 3 to 5 years. Um, Dozer's transmitter, actually, I should update this. I think we're going into our 6th year. However, we're not getting data anymore, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'll see if we have any math wizards out there. So 676 miles one way. How many miles do you think this bird has traveled in 6 round trip migration routes? You can throw your numbers in the chat if you want. I am not a math wizard. I will be very honest. I used my calculator all the way. So we have 6 round trips coming in at 8,112 miles, which is incredible. Let me go back here. Whoop. Ugh, whoop, I'm going a little too fast. So yeah, Dozer's been busy. And when you think about how dangerous migration is, like, and I love this picture. Like Petra took a great picture. Like I feel like he should always be sleeping for how much he's traveled. But as I mentioned, he is no longer transmitting data. So I don't know if you can tell in this picture, but something is missing from his transmitter, and that is the full length of his antenna. So 3 days before I booked my tickets to come to the Morro Bay Birding Festival to look for Dozer and to give a presentation and lead some beach excursions looking for him, his transmitter went down. So I immediately panicked, thinking something happened to him. But then we started to get these pictures in. People saw him. He was just fine. He was just a little bit lighter as he lost that transmitter. So we get a lot of questions of the now what. And so basically, we would love to get some more funding so we can track him down again on the breeding territory and remove his transmitter. Because, like I mentioned, the males are very their site fidelity is very high, so they like to go back to the same place. So if we can find him nesting again, then we can trap him again and take that transmitter off. So we're hoping some funding might come through. But I still came to Morro Bay. I had an amazing time. I met amazing people. And the education just never stops. And that's what I love about this. As I had my group of adults, we were looking at, there must have been 100 curlews all nestled in one leg up. And every day I was just so amazed to see curlews look so relaxed because when I see them, they're always crazed, they're always screaming, they're always panicked. So to see so many curlews just hanging out, living a curlew's best life was just something I will keep with me forever. But anyway, there was a bunch of little kids running on the beach, and they took one look at that pile of curlews and they all started beelining for them. And so we waved at the kids. We're like, hey, come over here, come over here. So we kind of diverted that from happening. And then I lowered my scope and I said, this is a much funner way to see curlews. And so the kids just couldn't wait to get their hands on that scope and be a scientist for the afternoon with me. So that was a lot of fun. And then, even though we didn't get to see Dozer in my groups that I took to the beach, a friend of mine that actually hired me for the Curlew crew all those years ago, she was in California and she came down to visit. And her boyfriend were on the strand. And she called me and told me, I think I see a leg flag. And I was just finishing up with my last group. Everybody was really tired. And so Petra, who was the volunteer that had first saw Dozer, she goes, I know right where they're at. So we got in the car. This is after I locked my keys into my rental car in a flash. I jumped in her car. She drove me there. And then I ran about a mile down the beach because I was trying to beat the sun from setting. And sure enough, there was Dozer foraging with a couple other curlews. So it was kind of like this full circle. Like I've been wanting to come see them on their wintering territory. I was always bugging my research director, hey, when are you going to send me? And so to finally get to see that was absolutely incredible. There's just the field work that goes into a curlew season is definitely not for the not for the weak and weary. It's a lot of long hours and a lot of heartache. It's a career that I never thought, in college I felt I'm gonna go save birds, right? And when you're bagging up carcasses and finding out that people are shooting, a protected species, like it was just such an eye opener, and it turned my career in such an interesting direction that I've loved. I've loved the education. I love connecting people to these birds. And I'm really hoping that funding can come through again for this project because it'd be great to get our fingers back on the pulse of how it's going. And so a project like this for a little tiny group like the Intermountain Bird Observatory, because we're a nonprofit, it really truly takes a village. And I probably don't have enough slides to put everybody's logos on, but we can't do this without help. And whether it's coming from federal grants, whether it's coming from key partners or private ranchers that allow us on their ranch lands and people who buy our Curlew t-shirts. I mean, every single dollar goes into the study and back to the outreach and education. So it's an incredible network that we've created. And so I'm super sorry. I don't even know if anybody's still out there listening because I put so much in my programs because I get so excited. So anyway, if there's any questions out there, please go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'm going to put this last slide up that has my information. If you guys want to take a picture with your cell phone, we're of course on all the social media platforms. It's a nice way to keep up with us and what we're doing. You might go to the Curlew Crew page that I was managing and not see much activity there because again, we've lost funding and a lot of my personal funding is gone. And so I'm now kind of helping on other projects until the end of August. So, but anyway, have fun. There's a lot of great information on the Curlew Crew Facebook page. Um, and it's just, the more we can keep talking about these birds and keeping these issues at the forefront, I think will just really help with future conservation management action plans. So thank you so much, everybody. And feel free, if I can't get to your questions tonight, you can email me for sure.
Right. Thank you so much, Heather. We do have a bunch of great questions here. So
Okay, okay.
some of
I'll
them,
stop. Let me
and
stop. Whoop.
usually I usually go up to the top so I can get the first ones, but let me see if so if the transmitter lasts for about 5 years, is feather molting affected by the attachment?
That's a great question. And we were kind of concerned about that our first year, but and now with people taking such amazing photos, we have not seen any issues. And we've actually what we call retired a bunch of transmitters off of birds. And we obviously, when we're taking the transmitter off, we check the feathers, we check the back, everything looks great. We also get a lot of questions like, do we feel that the transmitters are something that predators see. And we don't have any evidence to suggest that. And I think because it's hidden by so much of their feathers that you don't see any light or anything glinting off of it. So, yeah, that's a great question. We haven't seen any evidence of problems with the feathers at all.
Um, there's a question, why is the long-billed curlew considered low concern for conservation? But I don't think that's actually true. I think it's pretty high concern, isn't it?
Well, that's a great question too, because when you read like different websites, they'll like let me back up. For the most part, from what I understand, across the United States, their populations are relatively stable. There's just these pockets, and the one I'm most familiar with is the Southwest Idaho corridor that is seeing this huge decline, with that driving factor being recreational shooting. And I should have added a link in here, but we were a part of a collaboration of 18 authors, and we published our first paper for the public lands and the recreational shooting of not just curlews though. So like I said, from burrowing owls to golden eagles, so we do have a published paper out there. Um, and so it'd be nice. I think we do have a few more publications in the wings, but with everything going on with federal funding, everything's just kind of slowed down a bit. Let's put it that way.
Um, do, do, do. Um, just a note that in case you can catch us, that one of our Golden Gate Bird Alliance member who was at the Morro Bay Festival heard you speak and was like and told us like you have to get Heather to come talk. So we're so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you.
and now we're going to think about you every time we see a Curlew. So just
Oh.
there's a question about did you hear about the study about long-billed curlews responding to prairie dog alarm calls? Have you ever observed that with your local ground squirrels?
I haven't read anything, but it is an absolute fact. And it made some of my job a little difficult. Those little buggers are really good at their job. So there was one bird that I found the nest and I was going on approach But between the burrowing owl, whose hole was about 10 feet from the curlew's nest, to the ground squirrel mounds that were on the other side, between those two, I couldn't get anywhere near that bird. And so it took me a couple evenings of going out there, trying to be sneaky, trying to come from other angles, but they do absolutely communicate. And the curlews have learned it and know it.
Um, the question is, do you see similar levels of consistency for wintering grounds for each of the bird? Or I was back in the question is, are the curlews going to the same places each winter or different places?
Oh, so from what we can see on the map, they go to the same places. Yeah. So Dozer goes, like I get calls every winter, like I just cannot wait for my text to start going to know now, so especially since his transmitter isn't working anymore. So he has been spotted already on the wintering grounds, which is great. And so yeah, most of our birds all go to the same place. But what's interesting is sometimes their migration route might have a kink in it, and they're going a little bit different direction before they get to their spot. And so it would be great to be able to dive deeper into that. But without the funding and be able to dedicate the time. But um, and for a fun example was Dozer and another curlew that is in New Meadows where I live. They were the two going to Morro Bay, and so for whatever reason, um, Neil was his name. That it was in New Meadows, so he left his wintering grounds early, stopped over in Indian Valley, got to New Meadows, and there was still 4 feet of snow on the ground. And I'd never seen a curlew on the snow before. And let me tell you, it's really easy to find curlews on the snow. I loved it. So he hung out for a couple days and he decided to leave and he went back down to Indian Valley near Dozer. And it was fun to see how close he was to where Dozer's nesting site was. And then about 3 weeks later, he came back when most of the snow was gone. And so they follow the weather patterns, obviously. Um, and so yeah, sometimes you'll just see these circuitous routes happen, which is kind of fun.
So there was a question about if I photograph a tagged bird, should I submit it to the USGS site for tagged birds, assuming it's a curlew, or if it was a curlew, should I just send it to you?
Well, there's all sorts of people. So you can do USGS, Idaho Fish and Game, or what is it in California? Is it Department of Wild?
Fish and Wildlife, yeah,
Is
CD.
Fish and Wildlife. Because I think that's who originally kind of contacted me when this all started. Um, and so, yeah, you can make any of those phone calls. So everybody kind of ends up connecting somewhere along the lines. And so, yeah, that's a lot of fun. And it could be a songbird. I mean, a songbird, if you're lucky enough to find a hummingbird, with a band, because we band hummingbirds as well. But yeah, you can definitely call somebody like that. And it's really fun because at least I know with the Fish and Game in Idaho, they actually will send you a almost like a certificate that you can frame that has all the information about the bird. And so it'll tell you where it was banded, who banded it, how healthy it was, how old, if they know how old it was, if they banded it, if it was after hatch year, so it was an adult when they banded it. So there's a lot of great information they send you.
Definitely, if you ever tag bird, you should
Yeah,
report for sure.
yeah.
Um, there was a question about how does this the beak I forgot the technical term for it, but the way the beaks can bend.
Oh, the rhynchokinesis,
Thank you. Rhynchokinesis. That's a great word.
bendy beak. Like I said, we just say the beak bends.
The beak bends, yeah. How does that work? Is it
I don't have a ton of details on it. I just remember looking it up when we saw it that first time, and it's funny because even with hummingbirds, if you've ever seen some of these people take such amazing photography of hummingbirds, their bill is curved, but then when they go to snap at a little mosquito, like this all can bend like back. And so it's just really flexible. And then, like I said, I thought I remembered reading that there's these little sensory organs that you'd have to look at under a microscope and to see. But it's just so cool to have that ability to be able to pull up, their food and sense it underground. And I mean, they can't see what they're shooting at down there, right? So having that extra ability is pretty cool.
So yes, the smell and taste at the end of the bill. And those who are in my anatomy and physiology class right now know that birds can move their upper jawbone as well as their lower jawbone. You as humans can't move your upper jawbone, just your lower, but the birds can move them both.